welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Mowbray, and in each episode I will discuss the key topics that impact on football coaching from the foundation and youth development phases. Thanks for listening, I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey Charlie, welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Firstly, thank you for having me on the podcast, and how are you?
I'm not too bad at all. Well, I'm good. No, look, we're grateful. We spoke very briefly before we hit record, but we're always grateful for getting guests on, Charlie. The podcasts only really works from the people that come on it. I've run out of things to say. No one wants to hear me anymore. So it's really about the quality of the guests we get on, and getting someone like yourself with your experience and what you currently do and stuff is going to be invaluable to our listeners. So we're very grateful for your time, and I know you're busy. So you look quite relaxed and not nervous. You're used to doing this kind of stuff.
No, not really. I've tried to stretch myself a little bit. I know we were speaking previously. I do a bit of exposure on MK FM in terms of leading up to our game days. Yeah. When we have fixtures, and obviously when before lockdown. And I've been trying to get on a few webinars, podcasts here and there, just to kind of speak a little bit about what we're going to speak about today, and what I've tried to kind of grow and develop, and certainly try and give other coaches out there just little takeaway messages, and not saying that I'm the expert, but hopefully there's little wins that they might take away and be able to reach out to me, and I'll be able to support kind of that coaching community as well.
Exactly that, isn't it? Those little things make a big difference right on our journeys. We put them all together. So exactly that. Well, we'll come on, before we get onto the topic, we'll talk about you for a little bit, but just to say about the topic, I'm really excited about it because we often kind of agree a topic with a guest, and I feel like I'm kind of comfortable with it a little bit. I'm not no expert, but I kind of can talk around it. And with this one, I'm intrigued to see where it might go with us. So I'm looking forward to it. I genuinely am. And I've heard so many good things about what you do and what you do around this. So I'm excited to dig a bit deeper and find out more. But before we do, in true podcast style, as is the case, it'd be good to know a bit about you and maybe just your background with your sports and your coaching journey up to this point.
Yeah, so I, from a young age, kind of played football, not as to say just grassroots, not at a high level. I loved football. I played it. It was kind of a passion, but I suppose I never had the drive that I wanted to go and make it at the best level possible. And I think very early, I always watched football. I got involved in it, and it was when I was going through my, as a teen, and then almost when I finished school, I started A levels, and then a coaching apprenticeship come up with MK Dons F.C, so the local community trust, and at that time it was a risk that I took, because I think at 16, 17 you've got your social friends circles that you've known through years of school, and it was kind of a risk that I took very early, but it was something that I was passionate about. So I thought, you know what, I want to be able to take that risk, then just through. That was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, to be honest. And just for the sheer fact of after the apprenticeship, I went through numerous different roles, and I actually managed to kind of progress through roles within the set and the community trust. To start off with, it was very community based. So like your holiday courses, your half-term camps, your evening centres, your birthday parties, kind of. I was development officer, so I was kind of, as I say, increasing our offer with that. And then whilst I was doing that, I kind of had the opportunity to go and support with the girls RTC, which is obviously the regional talent club, lies equivalent to a boys' academy, and I supported there, and I just had a real, I don't know what it was, a real passion for coaching females very early on. I felt that the sessions that I was delivering, they wanted to listen, they wanted to take on board the information, the feedback, and just from that moment I had a real passion. And then a job come up as the girls and women's development officer. So as part of that role, I was then RTC centre manager. So not only and at that point, I just also wanted to do as much coaching as possible. So a lot of the time you'll kind of be centre manager, step away from kind of the football coaching side of it and look at more logistical side. But I very much wanted to challenge myself, and I went with both. So I not only was, as I say, organising fixtures, as I say, staff, communication with players' parents, I also still coached and then stepped forward as a lead coach for the 14s age group. Then alongside that, for numerous years, I was assisting with the women's first team. And I know previously you had James on your podcast, who was actually manager at the time. And I was learning my trade under him, and he learned so many things off of him, and he was fantastic. And obviously he then got the role with the FA in England, which then opened up the role of women's manager. And at the time, with everything tying in, it was another kind of risk that I took. I wasn't fully sure about whether I was ready to make that step to first team manager. There was a lot of worries, but ultimately in the end, it was me and someone that I've worked closely with, Owen, who went as joint managers. And then he then moved on to a different full-time role after about 9 or 10 months. And again, I then felt at that time that actually, I felt that we'd developed. I felt we'd done some good stuff, and actually, it was my time to then step up and take that opportunity. So I took that opportunity. I've been for about 2 years now, manager kind of on my own, and alongside that, I now work at MK College. So my full-time role is actually within the sports leaders and the leadership academy there. So I'm trying to now develop young up-and-coming coaches, and because I can see them very much early in their journey like I was. I've got kind of the best of both worlds of that. I'm developing them, but also I've still got my part-time role with the club and coaching the women's first team. So that's just a little bit about kind of my background and how I've got to where I am now.
Well, Charlie, I'm going to say, without embarrassing you, mate, you look far too young to have such a good history behind you. So something's gone right. Well done. Did you stop your A-levels to go to the apprenticeship? Was that the brave decision you made, really, to quit the A-levels to go into the apprenticeship with MK Dons?
Yeah, ultimately, yeah. So I started my A-levels, and probably only for 3 or 4 months. And it was, as I said, I was doing PE, I was doing sport within that, but I didn't know what the journey looked like after that. And it was kind of, it was one of them things that I weighed up, obviously, a lot of the options. But ultimately, like I said, one thing I took away from that is that's probably one thing that I was passionate about. And I thought actually straight away that if I look back on this, I'll probably 2 or 3 months down the line think that I've made a bad decision around it. So straight away it was ultimately, I think when I weighed it up, it was a decision that made sense, and ultimately,
Not many coaches kind of have this as their career path from day one, They kind of, not saying they fall into it, but it's not the thing they kind of think they're going to do from the very beginning. And there's usually a pathway to it. But it often requires at some point making a brave decision around something. And it seems like your brave decision was at that point, because it couldn't have been easy walking away from the kind of the traditional do your A-levels and you get your qualification, that to make a brave choice around really chasing your passion down. And I wouldn't encourage anyone to take a big gamble, but ultimately it seems to be quite common that people that make those brave choices and chase their passions end up having more success, and it seems like that for you.
Yeah, I tried to be fair. I was on a bit of a kind of guest speaker on obviously the MK College have got a fantastic football program there, and I went on a call today with them, and I explained my journey. And it was very much the way that I explained it was when I was going into it. I think at the time there was something like 24 apprentices there, and also it was kind of a risk that I wanted to make myself look better than any other apprentice there. And I was talking about obviously a little bit of values and culture we're going to speak about today, but I linked it back to that, and I said I was going into an industry that I wasn't qualified in, I wasn't experienced in, it was very new to me, so I knew that I had to put in the groundwork and kind of work harder than anyone else there. So it was kind of a message to them that the career pathway you go down now, you don't have to be, and I'm kind of saying a similar message to my sports leaders and where they want to go. And I say that you don't have to be, I'm not expecting you to come in here knowing it all, having the experience, and that's what you've got to kind of show wherever kind of industry you want to go in, whether it be in football, because some of them have a rugby background, cricket background, be passionate about what you want to do and really kind of showcase yourself and what you want to learn and develop. But yeah, certainly a risk that as you say, sometimes you have to take that risk and step and actually, it certainly paid off for me.
Being a joint manager and then managing for yourself, there's obviously a bit of a change in that. How did you find moving from doing it with somebody to kind of doing it on your own?
When we obviously took the role as joint managers with myself and Owen, we built up quite a good relationship. We both worked full-time at the club, and it was just kind of a natural fit. But then obviously when he then made the decision to move on, ultimately I felt the experience that I built up, because I've been in and around the environment for 3-4 years, and even before that I'd been working with the development squad. I felt that I'd built up quite a lot of relationships with the players already, and almost I'd made that stepping stone to management, and obviously responsibilities were halved with obviously joint managers, but when then I took the role singly, it kind of ramped up. But I think I was ready for that, and it was a decision I definitely again was glad that I made, and certainly certainly have enjoyed the time with Owen, but also I have enjoyed having that kind of single responsibility on my shoulders a little bit, and the last couple of years.
I've spoken about women's game a few times recently on podcasts, but it's obviously grown really well. It's moved on. We spoke to James quite a lot about that when he was on the podcast too. It must be a nice environment to be in. You must be pleased to be around that world and be a part of that process and moving everything forward.
Yeah, I think like I've been referring back to, I think being involved in it probably for the last 6 or 7 years, I think where you've seen even in that short space where it's kind of come from, and even the level of opposition that we play against, the quality, certainly it's exciting times, and obviously what's going on both on and off the pitch with the women's game. And obviously it's a shame obviously with lockdown at the moment, which is preventing us from playing at the moment, and obviously some other clubs are obviously disappointed to not be playing, but it has had almost a really quick journey and of the progression it's made, and I think obviously that's going to continue to develop and continue to push, and I think it is really, really exciting times to be involved.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to get your background and get a feel for what you're doing, and well done for having such a mixed but interesting journey up to this point, and I'm sure there's interesting things lie ahead as well. Before we get into the topic itself, I always think it's important to get an understanding of the guest and kind of their coaching philosophy and principles. So would you mind just sharing with us how you might describe your own philosophy, if you've got one, or your coaching principles, and what's important to you when it comes to coaching?
Yeah, I think ultimately, the route that I've had in terms of, like I said, the development phase, in terms of looking at the RTC phase and now being at kind of senior level, I just want to be able to kind of provide the best environment possible to allow players to develop, and that's to create an environment to allow players to develop both on and off the pitch, and that's through, let's say, positive learning environments and during the good and the bad times. So certainly it probably hopefully echo kind of the conversation we're going to have today. A lot of that is about just being able to provide that best environment, and that is, as I say, both for their footballing, to develop their footballing side and their ability, but also off the pitch as well. And I think that's probably something, the off the pitch stuff, that I've tried to develop more and more the last 2 or 3 years. And I think ultimately, when you first go into coaching that journey, everything's about that 90 minutes or however long. Everything's about what's going on there, and you forget everything else outside of that. And I certainly, as I say, have learned that probably the last 2 or 3 years, and certainly to try to develop that within my coaching.
Perfect. Well, like you say, I reckon in the conversation we're going to have now around the topic, we'll see some more of that, but it makes total sense. It will line up with what we're going to talk about. So the theme really is around kind of developing a culture to create positive performances. And we'd kind of exchanged a few messages through Twitter around this, and you know, 'cause this is something you're kind of passionate about and believe in. And to me, it was like, well, actually, I think I get this. I think I know what you're talking about, but I could be wrong. And I don't know how you would approach it. So I'm really intrigued to kind of find out more about that and delve a bit deeper, if that's okay. And I think maybe the good point to start would probably be to say, look, in the context of coaching, I mean, what do you mean by culture? What when you talk about culture, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think almost your culture it's how we kind of express ourselves. So it's either like the team values, the attitudes, the belief about kind of the team that we're working towards, or the sport that we're working towards, and I generally think that culture means everything. And I believe if you've got the right culture within a group or a squad, I feel it makes my role as a coach even easier. And in terms of the values that must be stuck to, and as I say, I keep referring to everything both on and off the pitch in terms of the culture and sticking to the values and the attitudes and beliefs that we're driving forward. And I think, obviously, we exchanged messages. I think a lot, when I first reflected on this, I kind of thought around the terminology of culture over performance. And ultimately, I then reflected back, and probably in the development phase, that does work, and that does, obviously, you can get success from that. But then I reflected more and more on kind of my role now, and we can create the best culture, but ultimately, if we're not getting performances, if we're struggling, if we're losing games, that still has an impact on probably my role as a coach and the team. So it was then actually creating the correct culture to impact or have positive performances. And we'll probably get on to a little bit about positive performances and what they look like as such. But yeah, I've developed kind of that model in my mind in terms of that in culture and obviously kind of interlining with positive performance as well.
When you talk about things like team values to support the culture, do you have kind of core values then, or team values that you maybe dictate, if you want a better word, or prescribe to the players or in the coaching team around you? Or is there something that's agreed with the team, or do you not have any values and it's more just about the way in which you operate?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a journey we've actually gone on with the core values and the values itself. So when I first took the role on my own singly, I kind of developed my own core values, and I had my own beliefs as a coach, what I want the team to show, what I want them to show both on the pitch. But again, when I went through that journey, I actually didn't involve the most important people within that, the players, the staff. It was all about kind of my beliefs. So we actually did a really fantastic task at the start of this season. So at the start of this season, I created a questionnaire. So I created a questionnaire to go out to every player. And ultimately it was a little bit about how they felt that MK Dons Women was perceived. But not only that, it was about what they wanted to do within their journey of football, what the core values they felt, and ultimately, actually, when this questionnaire went out, we had a couple of negative results in pre-season. So it was actually really eye-opening, because for myself as a coach, I got some, not criticism, but some feedback which helped me grow in terms of where they thought we were now, in terms of either not being able to play the way we want to, and there were loads of messages, and it was probably one of the most beneficial tasks that I've done, because the feedback that I got. But ultimately, I needed to involve, if I'm going to drive home the values or the belief or the culture, then they have to be a part of it. So we say the questionnaire went out. I said to the players when it went out, I said, you can write anything on this questionnaire and it's not going to come back on you. So if you say, I really dislike Charlie's coaching style, it won't be a fact of, you know what, you're not going to be part of this now. I said, it's complete open floor. I said, this is going to be your chance before the season to kind of have your say and really have an input. And like I said, the value that come back from this feedback was, we ended up creating core values from that, and there was 4 key core values that come out basically, and then that allowed us to follow them core values throughout. And I think ultimately, when you look at creating a culture, I said about making my role easier as a coach now, because they've had such an input in that. I then just have to. I just have to almost give them gentle reminders about that now. So, for example, one of them is around accountability and responsibility. So that's now, I haven't put that in place myself. They've said that that's so important. So, I don't know, for example, if players are consistently late, or if players aren't doing things that have been asked by either staff, by the physio, by the S&C staff, then I'll always reflect back to that, and I'll say, okay, well, we had the input of the accountability. That's what we tried. So ultimately, yeah, that's how we got to the journey, and that's how a little bit when I reflected of this, I certainly say at first was like, this is the values, these are my beliefs of my coach. Now I still had my input, I still got my beliefs as a coach and what I want the team to look like both on and off the pitch. But like I said, that it was so vital, and like I said, it wasn't just the players, it was, as I say, staff, it was the S&C staff, it was the physio, it was the assistants. If we're going to drive this forward, everyone has to be in with it and a part of it. And what I felt certainly was probably maybe a year and a half ago, because they were my values, if there was a split kind of half in one direction, half in the other, then it was mixed messages. Now that we've got, say, 24, 25 player squad, even if we've got maybe 1 or 2 who are still not fully with it, there's 23 of them pushing in one direction, they will kind of grasp the rest of them and they will come in the same direction. So yeah, that's ultimately how the journey went with that.
I think that's such an important point, Charlie, because I would imagine that there's a lot of us that believe in having the values and trying to drive a positive culture or great environment. But ultimately, if it just becomes a dictate from the coach, one person or even two people, it won't have the impact unless you can get the buy-in from everybody that's involved in that. Obviously, the team is an important part of that, but even beyond that, really, the club as a whole, right? And all the stakeholders influence that, because then you can get a consistency in trying to stick to those values and live and breathe them every day. Otherwise, they just become words and it doesn't actually have the impact. I'd like us to talk more about maybe what that looks like in practice, that's okay, in a bit. But just before we do, because that's only really half the equation, really, of the conversation, can you talk about what you mean by positive performances? So we'll come back to the culture stuff in a second, but obviously if we're going to use that to try and drive what we term as positive performances, I could probably second guess what I think they might mean, but it'd be good to know from your point of view what you mean by that and what it looks like in practice.
Yeah, I think ultimately in practice is I think that, well, the when I perceive positive performances, it's actually around, now a positive performance, you will obviously say, I'll get 3 points or get a win, but ultimately it's more than that. We often set out 3 or 4 clear objectives from the game that we want to achieve, or standards, and ultimately we put that in during the week. And we are in an industry where obviously you looked at winning and losing games, but I think positive performance is meeting the objectives that we put in place, because ultimately when we might win games of football that we played really poorly, or vice versa. We might have played really well but lost games. And I think if you perceive positive performance as winning games or getting the result, then you might lose focus of that culture or that value or what you're setting out, because if you set out objectives and you meet 4 out of 4 and what you've worked on the week, then that is a positive performance. Whether that be, as I say, whether that be you've won that game or you've lost that game. If you've met all 4 objectives and you've lost the game, you probably have only just lost that game or competed for large spells. So ultimately, that's when I perceive positive performances. It was because, like I said, we got promoted in this league, and we are in, as I say, a very good league, and we know there will be games that we lose this season, but I think it's about how you lose that, and I think it's about, again, how you meet some of them values that we put in place, but ultimately the objectives. And if we can walk off that pitch going, you know what, we felt that we met 3 out of 4 of them, then I can almost not go home happy, but I can go home going, you know what, we certainly met a lot of them. There are learning points, but that's a positive performance. Whereas the other side is, if we felt that we didn't meet any of the objectives and performance went out the window, then you probably perceive that as a negative performance as such.
I find that fascinating, Charlie, because I think the majority of the conversations I have are obviously with coaches probably working in the foundation or YDP phase, so for the younger players, which is great because that's kind of where I'm come from, and it's fine. And it's always interesting when I speak to coaches that predominantly work in the results business, if you like. It's about getting the wins, There's nothing wrong with that either. I think, it's horses for courses. But I think what's lovely to hear, and it may surprise some people out there because it surprised me, is you saying, actually, do you know what? I get I've got to win games as a team. We've got to do that as part of the job here. But actually, if we only focus on that, then we're going to probably we could be easily misguided or lose some of the process over the outcomes. And to hear even you saying that actually within your games environment or your match environment, you still have objectives away from the result itself. I guess to obviously to try and drive the result the right way, but you have these objectives you can measure against. I mean, I know foundation phase coaches coaching under 8s, under 9s that wouldn't do that, and their results really don't matter. But yeah, they would still be focused on the result above anything else. And personally, I think it's quite refreshing. So actually, people who are working in the results game are still looking at putting in objectives around performances as opposed to just looking at the result, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does, definitely, and that is probably something that within my coaching ultimately I have tried to create, because I think, like you said, we are still a result-based business. So there will be times where potentially you might think, actually we walked away with 3 points there, and you probably still have a feeling of happiness inside, but you might have not really performed to any level that. And then it's almost, sometimes we call it almost like, I've used properly terminology before, it's almost like a tick box process. You've done it, okay, but there's still obviously learning points. And I think, but in terms of even the journey we're going on currently with MK Dons Women, we we have been progressing. We got promoted into a league, and it was very much the first couple of years sustained. Don't get relegated, because the standard of that league, only one team go up, and that is the winners, and it's such a challenging league. So I think if you look kind of objectively as well, then you're setting yourself up, hopefully then you're going to progress. So I look back even to this season, very early on, we when the fixture list come out, and just to give you a bit of context, we had Watford at home first game of the season. Now Watford are top of our league currently, fantastic side, really good side, will be pushing for promotion. So we knew straight away that's going to be a challenge. Now we were 4-0 down at half time against them, first game of the season. Straight away, if we're looking at the results straight away, it could be right. You're not good enough. We're not. But ultimately, the halftime team talk, I was very much going, okay, we haven't met any of what we wanted to do so far. We haven't met the basic principles of what we set out. And then we again, this is where we can reflect back to our culture and our values. One of our values was being hard to beat. So I said, okay, a lot of people will kind of the game's over. We made that difficult for ourselves, but can you make yourself hard to beat? Go and win the second half. And that was ultimately, again, we ended up losing the game 4-1, but we won the second half 1-0. And I think what then happened, from that, the week later, we went away to Crawley Ross. And in the lockdown, Crawley Ross were 9 points clear and hadn't lost at home for 2 years. And we went away there and won 1-0. But I think that was almost a knock-on effect of, because that Watford second half, and because we stuck to some of the objectives and the values, then we actually went into the Crawley Ross game with real belief, and then the result picked up because of looking at more objectively rather than, as I say, I'll win and lose here and there. And I think that probably grew, and our belief certainly grew, and we actually took that into so far the rest of the season. But our first 3 games were Watford, Crawley Ross and Oxford, and they were the top 3 from last year. So if we would have looked at that going, okay, we've got to pick up this amount of points, a certain amount of points, then we probably would have looked at that and we would have failed straight away, because we were up against massive challenges. But because we kind of took small steps and setting clear objectives and trying to work towards them values that we set, it ultimately meant that we come out with 3 points out of them 3 games, and then we took that onto a run of winning 4 in a row. So yeah.
What a wonderful example of, like you say, and that's just probably part of the culture. But actually, if you can create a culture that takes you away from focusing just on the result, but on performance and on process, then actually the results come anyway, right, in due course. And when you can hear you're doing it with a senior team at a high level, I can't help but go back to the fact that how many times I don't see this happening with young teams where results really do not matter. Even if you're going to say under 12s, that technically it becomes competitive, which, we can argue that as much as we want. But you think it's a real struggle or not a real struggle, but I just wish more coaches would, I hope listen to what you're saying and think, actually, do you know what? If Charlie can do it, if Charlie can see the benefits of actually focusing on the process rather than the outcomes and set match objectives away from the result. Hey, if the result comes, brilliant. But actually, we can look at the performance and individually and collectively to see how we're getting on there. And that's the most important bit, because that will get us there in the end. And I can totally resonate with the fact that actually, if you've got a few tough first few games, let's not worry too much about it. Let's focus on ourselves as we can do. And then when we get those games, maybe then when we're ready for, we'll do well and we'll shine in those games. Charlie, I wondered, with the positive performances, how do you manage it in relation to individuals or units or the whole team? Because I can imagine there's games where one of the players may shine and be brilliant and a couple may struggle and things like that. How do you do it as a collective? Do you have one-to-one conversations, or do you deal with it as groups? How do you manage that across the team dynamic?
Yeah, I think it's a bit kind of mixture of everything. We kind of have, obviously, we have our video analysis, so we do reflect a lot straight after games. But ultimately, we have units. So we do a lot of, we have on our first training session, which is Tuesday evening, we'll do a lot of unit specific stuff. And thankfully, the way kind of it works, we have our goalkeeping coach, and then I have 2 assistants. So it kind of quite nicely breaks into, one has consistently worked with the defensive unit, one has worked with the midfield, and one of us has worked with the attacking unit. And I think, again, it brings the coach closer to, because also when I work with assistants, I want them to feel like they've got value and input, and not just feel like, okay, I'm managing and they're just stood next to the manager. I want them to feel a part of this journey as well. And I think them having their set unit to work with, they then ultimately, I don't know, whether we concede a goal defensively, which has been poor to concede on a weekend, then they can reflect on that and work on that first 45 minutes, an hour on a Tuesday. Or if the midfield haven't moved the ball quick enough or have taken too many touches, then the other assistant who works with the midfield can then do work with them. But like you said, I think there's a mixture of both, but also again just kind of the journey we've gone on. Like, I found there's been so much value into, I reflect back into like the accountability, and at points of season, individual players have made mistakes. But do you know what the really powerful thing was that players are actually going into the dressing room at the end of the game and going, I apologise for that, it was a mistake, I hold my hands up. And you know what, that is so, that, I mean, it shows a big character to be able to do that, if anything, because to apologise in front of a group and admit that you've made a mistake. But the little bits like that, even in a results-based business, I'll never criticise a mistake. No one's meant to make a mistake. And I think especially the way that we're looking to play, we are trying to take risks in possession and just seeing a couple of, and it's been 2 or 3 players this season that have held their hands up and gone, sorry, either my performance wasn't good enough or I hold my hands up. And I sometimes do that as well. And I've apologised to players. And I said, actually, you know what? We've got that right. I believe that we approached that in the wrong way as staff and as coaches. But I think there's real value in that connection, because I think as soon as you see someone apologising and going, actually, there is that bit of emotional attachment to it, they go, fair enough, and then we move on and progress together.
And what a great way to get wins out of maybe defeats or results you didn't want to happen, the result, but you still got some positives out of it by focusing on other elements. You know, walking into the change rooms and holding your hands up and saying, look, I got it wrong, I made a mistake, whether that's the coach or the players. You know, that suddenly, okay, you might not have got the result you wanted, but you've still got something out of that match time that's worthwhile and you can carry forward. And you mentioned about including or you work as a team with the other coaches that you've got supporting you. And again, I guess that's part of the culture, right? Because if you didn't do that, it would go against what you're trying to create. So having everyone's involvement in that process and some ownership of that must be part of the culture, I assume.
Yeah, definitely 100% that. And I think, well, I'd hope so. When you speak to my coaching staff, in terms of, I try to build up real strong relationship with them. And one of them I have known for a good 7 or 8 years, and say so straight away him coming in. One of them I've worked through with the club through, and one of them actually got in touch with me and then come onto the journey. But I think, like I said, they have to feel part of it, and when you when you probably, if you were to see it in practice, either on a training session or a game day, we have clear structure in terms of, even I'll communicate to them what I want them to look at. Because I use the terminology that I'll be the one who gets emotionally attached to the game, because I think as a manager you often, either decisions, even things like that, still at the as I say, although we are objective and setting these out, ultimately we still are, you get emotionally attached in them 90 minutes. But it'll be like challenges in terms of, can you see how they're playing? Have they got a common pattern? What's their shaping? And I think because they have clear roles, like I said, they're part of this journey. And even, like I said, even the strength and conditioning coaches, again, they have such value and input. And I meet with them even during lockdown, because they're setting out a physical plan every Monday, and it's keeping that relationship strong, and with the physio as well. And I think often, I don't know, in maybe senior level in football clubs, they might feel, okay, their job is just to turn up, let's say for a physio, treat injuries, but no, actually, you are part of this, and you are respected as much as, and if we respect you that highly, then players, whether they're talking to myself, whether they're talking to assistant coach, an S&C coach, they know that they value everyone the same.
Charlie, so that's brilliant. I really appreciate that. There's some great stuff in there. So you kind of outlined, what culture means to you. You've described about positive performances and how that plays out in practicing games. And you may have kind of covered some of this stuff in the next question anyway, but I'm going to ask in case there's more we can talk about. Could you share with us then how, as coaches, we can develop a culture to help create positive performances? What can we do in our teams? Whether, maybe it's harder for you to relate it back to the younger age groups, but I think a lot of stuff will correlate across anyway. But with you, what is it you actually do then beyond the stuff you already spoke about that helps create that culture that in turn drives those performances?
I think I'll probably highlighted it again previously, but I think it is the probably your first point of call is going and involving everyone in that process. And I suppose probably even at a younger level, and again, a little bit of experience I had on this was in terms of when I was, and this probably allowed me more because of my role, but when I was RTC centre manager, I was also going through my B licence at the same time. So I did my B licence with the 14s group, and on the Friday, because we had to set out game plans for the UA, I would set that out. I would set 3 clear objectives of what we're working on for that game day, and that would be sent out to all parents. And then also because we used to play in thirds at the RTC, so 3 25 minutes, I would already set out what the team looked like in then 3 25 minutes. So it was very much, now I was lucky because I was in a role where I was full-time RTC manager, so I had all contact details and things like that. So I know obviously not everyone has that kind of luxury, but I think even at that point, I was involving them in the process. So if we were asking them to play a certain way, and then you've got, for example, parents on the sideline shouting different messages, hopefully by seeing that presentation, one, they know where their daughter's going to be playing tomorrow, so they can straight away get in that mindset. And 2, it is about, like I said, involving them to then go, okay, you know what, this is what's been asked, so we've got to encourage that. Or even after game conversations, right, even do you feel that was met, and little conversations like that. So I certainly think at a starting point it is involving everyone in that process and giving them a say, because the last thing, like I said, you'll have your own beliefs as a coach, you'll have your own desire and drive and even systems you want to play and format, but if you get everyone involved in that, then it's so important. Because, for example, I use an example when I felt that leadership was such an important thing, having leaders out there on the pitch. But ultimately, when I got, again, these reflections back, not a lot of messages were saying that they wanted leaders out there. They might have wanted 2 or 3 leaders, and that was fine. And the rest of them just worked and spoke to them leaders. But I had in my head that it was so important. But if I was to drive that forward without having them conversations, then I'm kind of giving off the wrong message, and players aren't going to buy into that. So yeah, I would say, and like I said, probably reflecting back is that gaining feedback, and don't be again in your journey as a coach. When I was starting out as a coach, whenever I got feedback, it was almost like I was not scared, but you take it to heart. You go, okay, I've done something wrong, or. Whereas when I get feedback now, I'll certainly digest it. And I don't mean that you have to agree with all the feedback you get, because some of it you can challenge and go, well, this is why I've done this, or this is why this has happened. But I think you become a little bit more thick-skinned and you go, you know what, okay, I'll take feedback. Like I said, them questionnaires, I certainly got loads of different messages, and it weren't all positive, and we weren't going through a positive spin in pre-season at that point. But also the flip side of that, when we went on a successful run, I got some really nice messages. So I think it's very up and down in the coaching business. But yeah, to develop that, I certainly would encourage anyone to start involving everyone. And certainly, it's probably at a younger age, actually get the children, either the boys or girls, what are they there for? Because ultimately, you might be drumming something forward where they just want fun and enjoyment, and they want excitement, and they want to socially meet new people. And that can still be values. It doesn't have to be hard to beat. We're having that because that's the top level of trying to get results. But ultimately, it might look completely different to an under 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s group.
At the younger ages, I try with the teams to include them in the process as much as possible. Even with under 6s, 7s, and 8s, we'll agree a sessions, things we're going to work on, and stuff like that. Is that something you can do with senior teams when you're kind of playing to win? I mean, I think that culturally it sounds like it's an ideal thing to do with younger groups, but how much license have you got as the manager of a team to get the players' involvement in what you actually work on and what you do? Because I guess ultimately it's your decisions, whether who plays, where they play, the style of football you play, those kind of things. How much do you relax that, or at least let the players participate in that decision-making process?
Yeah, I think again, I still think they have to have a say in that, and I still think that, like I said, we want to have a style of the way that we want to play, and we try and hammer that down, and it almost is that's how we want to play, and we try and build that up. But there still has to be some sort of not decision from them, and ultimately, like I said, they're not going to decide what session we do or what session we put on. But again, feedback's so vital. We done during this lockdown, we use this quite well, and what we did again. comes onto responsibility. But I online created different breakout groups for the units to reflect on what they've enjoyed doing within the units and what they feel that they need to do more work on. So again, us as coaches, we obviously put on the session and stuff like that, but they might be reflecting on, and they might feel, I don't know, let's say we're doing a lot of work defensively as a back four and in that unit, but they might feel like they need a lot of work defensively individually in 1v1 battles. So straight away, that gives us good reflection to go, okay, that can be a starting point that when we get back after lockdown or whatever, that we start looking and breaking down. So I still think there is, like I said, real value. And we did, like I say, a little feedback and Q&A to go, what have you enjoyed doing, but what do you still want to do more of or challenge yourself as players? Because like I said, it is there ultimately, still as the coach, they're the ones, the 11, the 12, the 13, 14, 15 involved on the game day. They're the ones playing the game. So if they feel like there's an area that they're falling short on or they're not doing well enough in, then let's give them the environment to be able to work on that and hopefully get success, as I say, on the game day, because they're the ones who are going out there and I'm only doing a real small percentage on a game day because they're the ones who are putting in the hard work to get that result.
You've spoken a lot about feedback and reflection. I can totally see how that works. We're trying to create this right kind of positive culture to drive these performances. How much of that would include peer-to-peer feedback, or I guess feedback in many ways, but even just if it's a case of, look, if I'm playing centre back and my right back's having a bad game, how much can I have that conversation with the right back, or should I be staying away from that? In your team, would you be encouraging them players to talk to each other and to give direct feedback in a constructive way, or is it still more done as a group dynamic?
No, again, I still think that it has to come from the players as well, ultimately, because I think, like I said, there is also value in you as the coach telling them, but sometimes if your teammate is supporting you or telling you, then I still think there's so much more value in that as well. And I ultimately think as well with that is we have a lot of players now, and we kind of pride ourselves a little bit on this, but we have a lot of what our RTC 16s will step up to the women's either senior side, or if we don't say if they're not quite there, we've got a development squad as well. But probably over the last 2 years since I've been involved, we've had 5 or 6 of them RTC players who have made the step up to first team football and have been involved. And I think you're completely right in terms of you might have, someone within the back four who's played for 15, 16 years in the women's game, to an RTC player who's gone through her stage of development, which has all been about developing. Now suddenly she's playing a game that 3 points matters so importantly. So I think that's where that value and that one-to-one peer conversation and feedback is so valuable, because just sometimes having, I don't know, a player next to you who's supporting you, putting your arm around your shoulder and going, you know what, it's going to be okay, and support them through that. I think there's so much value in that, and having that senior figure to support you during that game, or if things are going wrong or they're going through maybe, because I certainly think at 16, 17, confidence levels drop and go so highly in terms of they'll play with fear, they'll play so freely, but if the mistakes happen, we've got to balance that, because their confidence can be knocked very quickly. So having that, as I say, that individual next to them or alongside them to support them is so valuable.
Have you found, Charlie, when you get girls come into the team that maybe have not been in the environment or environment like you're creating there, do they struggle with it at all, or do they adapt quite quickly to what the culture you've created? Because I could imagine that for some people it would be fantastic. They might have gone through that journey with previous coaches before they've come to you in some environments, but for others they potentially haven't had that same experience. So to come into that may feel, however nice it may feel a bit uncomfortable because it's different. Is that something you've seen, or does that not happen?
I think it's certainly, like I said, I'm not saying that everyone echoes the same values. Some of them they might agree with, some of them they might have taken a little bit of time to get on board. I certainly think ultimately, and I think where it comes back to is when I speak about culture and values as well, I don't think that they need to be changed year on year. Ultimately, now I believe that we've got a real good set of core values and a culture, and we now drive that forward. So now we obviously recruit players towards that. And what I mean by that is obviously you can have players now coming in, say when we have pre-season, next pre-season, but you can now communicate them values straight away and go, this is what we're looking for, this is what we have. Now, they might not agree with that, might not be on board, and that might not fit, and they might move and want to go elsewhere. Yeah. But then the ones you know that you are bringing in and bringing on board, understand it and get it. And I certainly think, like I said, that that we have created that here at MK at this moment in time, where so many people understand what that means and understand what each of them mean. And because, like I said, because they've had such an input in it, I haven't really gone over that hurdle yet of players not buying into it or not being in that environment. Because even the ones that we recruited were very much, as they happy in what they saw and wanted to be involved in that. And then there's certainly probably, like I said, from pre-season or when new players come in or when the RTC players step up, it's very much, these are our values, these are what we're trying to stick towards, because accountability probably does heighten on a 16-year-old because they've been, they've been through their development stage, maybe where minutes have been shared more and things like that. Well, suddenly you're now going to senior football where there is a little bit more responsibility on yourself. Although parents might still drive you there and take you to games, you are now stepping into the senior game. So you've got to understand that your accountability maybe to communicate things to the manager, to talk to the manager, it comes on your shoulders a little bit more. Rather than previously, it might have been parents speaking to an RTC manager. It's now having that little bit of responsibility and accountability. So, certainly, hopefully I've answered that. We probably haven't, as I say, had many hurdles that we've had to step over so far in terms of disagreements or not buying into it as of yet.
And obviously the culture you create is pretty much within the team dynamic itself. So not everyone gets to see that who's outside the team. But has it had an impact on recruitment and retention of players? I mean, does word get out that actually this is the kind of place to be, and if you want to be in that kind of environment, or does it not work that way because it's quite closed anyway? Or does it help drive things like getting players you want in or keeping the players you've got with you because of what you've created?
Yeah, so I think the getting players in, certainly. I think the players that had come in, I think you're always, certainly pre-season, when players come in, you are always challenging. Probably they might be looking at other clubs. They might be, say, trialling out other clubs. And I think certainly straight away, I think the little bit of like togetherness that we try and create, and players take that on board themselves. And what I had, it's not me going to a player, can you keep contacting that player to get in touch with her and communicating with her. I think there's, like you say, probably not so much at the moment is, this is their culture, this is what I want to be part of. But I certainly think that players are more interested now because they're seeing what we're doing on the pitch, and that's a reflection of the culture and values. So ultimately, when you get success on the pitch, probably that increases players who want to be involved in that. And then, as I say, the players that did come in, we've brought in 2 or 3 players who had played at top level, either in the Super League or Championship. And I think they come in and saw that, and they saw that the spirit, and straight away, I think a lot of them commented on actually the environment here is fantastic. What you've got going is great. And I think often I shouldn't have to go, this is what we want, this is our culture, you should almost be able to hopefully walk in to either a session or watch us probably from this point last season to this season and go, that's what it looks like. It doesn't, I think often I can tell you all this, but if it doesn't look like that in practice, then it's kind of non-existent. So it has to go and be shown on the training ground and on the in a game day.
That's a great answer, Charlie, because I think there's a lot of coaches with best intentions who can explain this stuff and talk about it really well, but ultimately, unless you're creating it tangibly, it won't play out in practice. And if you are creating tangibly, you haven't got to explain it, because actually when you rock up to a session, you'll just get the sense. You'll get the intensity of the training, the communication between the players, the body language, the way the equipment's looked after. All those things just come out by default from creating the environment that you've got there and that culture. So it's a good answer, because actually you shouldn't need to explain it. You just need to live and breathe it, and then you'll see it by turning up and being part of that. I wondered, is there, you spoke about quite a few already, so don't feel like you've got to get more if there's not, but just the benefits to doing this. What benefits have you seen from taking this approach? There's obviously some clear ones you spoke about already, but, if I was to adopt something like this, what would I see, hopefully, over a period of time from having that kind of positive team culture that helps drive those positive performances?
With that, I think one of the main things is say ultimately you look at yourself as a coach, and I think one of the biggest benefits is it keeps driving you and improving you and progresses you forward in terms of, and what I link to that is that there's been a couple of occasions or something that I'll communicate, or this will happen, or this will be communicated, and I haven't done it, or it's been late or something, and I'll get a message, and I guarantee if I don't do it, I'll get a message by 1 or 2 of the players say, you said you was going to do it, and it works both ways. So ultimately, I think, like I said, it's okay me again driving that for the players, but I need that back as well. So if I'm not doing something right, if I'm not showing that I don't know, accountability, or another one is, as I say, is professionalism. If I'm not showing that, then please tell me as well. And there was actually, it was, and this is kind of, again, probably where you look at a value or a culture. This is not even really football related. There was one before lockdown, but just before Christmas, where our training venue, our toilets were out of use. And when I got there, and then that didn't get communicated to the players, and then players were arriving 5 minutes before the session for a 2.5 hour session, and we're in MK, and we got players coming from Cambridge, Peterborough, like they're travelling a long way, Kent, so there's a long way there, and that was poor from us, that we've got to be held accountable for that, because then players were having to drive and find, and this was actually in the height of lockdown, so where pubs would close and things like that, so they're now trying to find a local garage, and actually that then had, when I went home and reflected, we didn't start the session until 25 minutes in. A lot of players were then annoyed and frustrated, and that whole tempo of the session just completely died. And I think when you look at that in almost in practice, that was us at the start, and that was myself of holding that accountable. And just as I say, in practice, that's probably one thing on the flip side where it's been shown. And I think, flipping that back to players, again, I had a really powerful conversation just before the season started, and a player come and spoke to me, and she had an injury, but I think she wanted to impress and start the first game of the season. So she tried to push herself through that game, and I think had a conversation with the physio and was telling her that she was okay. She lasted 15 minutes, and in the end, she come off. And again, I didn't hold her accountable by all accounts. I made the sub pre-season. On Tuesday, she come up to me first thing, can I meet you before training? Yeah, not a problem. Had a conversation. She said, I've apologised to the team, but I want to apologise to you. That wasn't good enough from me, because I knew that I wasn't fully fit, and I knew that my performance, I was going through the motions, and that then impacted your selection. It then upset the team in the first 15 minutes. And I, again, like straight away, if I was to go, that was a little nut. Straight away, I was like, that's just the value coming out. Like, her just taking that responsibility, and I didn't ask that, and I said, listen, you don't have to apologise to me. You know now that that's a learning curve, because ultimately she then had 3 or 4 weeks out where she missed the first few games, so she's probably learned from that journey as well. So I think, yeah, there are so many key little takeaway messages that I always take from this season and go, that's that coming out in practice, either on the pitch, or like I said, I've used examples that are off the pitch that don't even have to have an element of football to it.
It must really help enhance ownership from everybody, from yourself, the other coaches, the players, and that can only be a good thing, right? Having that shared ownership and that accountability must be fantastic. And being in an environment where it's okay to get things wrong, as long as you reflect and recognise it and then move on from it. That's a great example of that with the player that played with an injury. Just I wonder if you don't mind sharing with us, have you got a favourite session or practice, or if not, like necessarily, 'cause it's a bit different, I guess, when you work in your space, maybe you have, but or if not, if we were to come and see one of your sessions, what would we see if we were watching you?
I think ultimately, it's a good question, because I think a favourite session is always kind of difficult one to go, okay, this is my favourite, but I honestly love chaos. So, and what I mean like that, we will always almost start off first 15-20 minutes after the first session of the week. Ultimately, and hopefully you would see this quite a lot of the time, if you was to come out and watch one of my sessions, it will always be either something which is off limited, more little amount of touches as possible, players in small tight areas, and I always feel like there has to be a goal element to it, because I feel that no matter what, whether you are a 6-year-old, whether you are a 36-year-old, if there's a goal there, the first thing they want to do is kick footballs in the goal. And I think ultimately, I just think that increases the tempo straight away. And there's such a feel-good competitive environment about it that's probably a short snippet, because I think no matter even because again at a senior level you obviously have to hammer down set pieces or patterns of play, which sometimes are unopposed and aren't the most exciting thing. But I think if you set off the tone with something fun and exciting like that, even at senior level, straight away they're buzzing around. There's a bit of competition around it, and you've already got that buy-in. So yeah, that was probably a lot of, and even a lot of things I do try and create are with an end goal. Even if we're doing some sort of phase of play where the defending team, I still like them to have an element of success of a goal to score in, because I feel that again there's a buy-in. Right, stop them scoring, winning the ball. Now we get our success. So yeah, that's ultimately. I probably don't, as I say, not have a specific favourite session, but that's kind of of a model that if you was to come down and see in practice, a lot of the time, the first 15, 20 minutes, it is competitive, high tempo, and just as I say, players to get the feel of that week and ready to go.
Getting that engagement is so important, isn't it? Because I often hear, especially again in the younger phases, I haven't got enough time with the players, one session a week's not enough, or this. I think, and that, I'm not saying it's not a fair point to make, but ultimately what you need to do, whether you've got one session a week or 6 sessions a week, is how you use that time, right? And it's making the most out of it. And having the engagement with the players is the most important thing. And usually high intensity, game-based, directional, competitive stuff, because they're all sports people, right? That's why they're playing sport, because they're competitive people. So if you don't put these things in the practices, it's hard then to drive that engagement, and therefore you don't get the necessary returns out of the training as well. It's so great to hear that, you know, again, even at an adult level, playing competitive football at a high level, you're still doing things that actually we could easily be doing within the foundation and YDP phase quite easily, and probably should be, because if you're going to do it at that phase, we should be doing that stuff here so they prepared for that when they get to you. Do you think that, do you think, I know it's hard for you to probably say this, but, and I don't know how much you see of the younger phases outside of MK Dons, but do you think as grassroots coaches for the younger years, we're doing enough, generally speaking, to get the players in a position to move on to senior football? And are we embrace some of the stuff that you guys are doing at the younger age groups?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of good work that's going on in terms of I think even female and male game, creating them players to be able to step up to. I would say a little bit of. I think the learning curve is still around that game understanding and game management, and I think. Just through and this is probably looking at more female side, I think just through my journey, a lot of it, as I say, 14s, 16s is development, or certainly they're still, and then suddenly it ramps up, and I still think probably the pressures of dealing with winning and losing games, and don't get me wrong, that doesn't come at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That probably ramps up at 14, 15, 16, when you are starting to approach senior level, because ultimately, like I said, they've still got to understand the little clever bits of game management that might be needed when we are winning games or when we're losing games. So I still think, yeah, like you're right there in terms of, I think we are doing a lot of good stuff at grassroots level, and ultimately, I think one of the things, or one of the reasons I did want to come on here as well is because I watch a lot of webinars or listen to a lot of podcasts, and sometimes it comes down to, you say, whether you have access to that. So I don't know if it's a pro level, if it's a top level, what access do you have to that? You probably don't have some of that access, but ultimately, hopefully this model fits in terms of this can be replicated at grassroots level. So it, like I say, a values culture. I created my own questionnaire off the cuff, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be now, okay, I have more contact time with the players, so I can drive that forward more, but it's not out of the picture for a grassroots coach who's maybe coaching them once a week and then a game day to follow a similar model.
That's such a good point again, Charlie, because actually, maybe it's even more important, because the less time you've got, the more you've got to make it count, right? So actually, if you can get the culture right in that environment, you're going to get more out of those sessions, whether it's just 1 or 2, or actually if you've got 6 a week, maybe you can afford to lose a little bit of session time because of you've got more with them. I'm not saying that it's the case, but certainly the less you've got, the more important this whole culture conversation becomes, I would say, because that would help drive up their intensity of training sessions to get more out of it. So it probably means more important the less time you got, and maybe even the lower level you're at, because you've got less time with those players. Sorry, that's been superb. I'm so grateful. That we've almost done an hour. I've got a couple of questions before I let you go, if that's all right. But there's so much in that. I mean, you've really highlighted the link between actually culture and performance, and obviously the premise here being, look, drive a positive culture, and that can really create positive performances. And if you get that right, then you can have loads of successes. You're obviously doing a cracking job there at MK Dons. I'm sure it's always a work in progress. But thank you so much for sharing that information and getting it out into our listeners, because I know we'll take some stuff and put that back into our practices when we're with our players. So thank you for that.
I really appreciate it. Again, once again, thank you for having me and letting me share. Kind of, as I say, hopefully there's just a couple of little key takeaway messages that people, that coaches can kind of take away from here.
There's some great stuff, and I think just the fact you're saying this stuff from the level that you're at, I think that alone will resonate really, really well with our listeners. But a couple more questions, if that's okay, Charlie. One is, we ask all our guests this: if there was one thing, just one thing you could change about the world of coaching, what might that be?
this is probably more from a selfish point of view, and it's not more linking into coaching. And I think we spoke a little bit about the growth of obviously the women's game, and I still want, as much as it's grown and the fantastic journey it's had, I just think a little bit more exposure to our level. So we're tier 3 and 4, and I think certainly something I try and pitch it in line with a men's game, and I think often you've got, say, I don't know, first round FA Cup games on BBC or whatever, and lower level teams, or if there's international weekends, you've got League One, League Two, and I think there is still so much value in terms of seeing the coaching, the playing at that level and our level, and having that little, whether it is either to say on a BBC iPlayer or an app that can just have a bit of exposure, certainly in terms of, let's say, the FA Cup levels. Like I said, we're going in at round 2, and we've got, hopefully that gets back up and running, a fantastic tie against Watford. But we don't get that exposure to the telly. So actually what a great time it would be to go, you know what, FA Cup second round, and a great opportunity for the winner to play a Championship or Super League side. So
it's a great one, and that's what this is all about. I've got no doubt it's only a matter of time till you get there, and let's hope he comes sooner rather than later. The women's game has grown so much over the last 5 to 10 years that I've seen. I mean, even in the grassroots space that I'm in, seeing the girls, you know, we probably had 10 girls playing 4 years ago. We've probably got 60 playing now in our little club, you know. Yeah. And it's like, you know, it just keeps going the right way. And that's just one small snippet of all the wonderful work that people like you are doing out there. And I know there's lots of people driving this forward, and credit to everybody. And I'm sure it's just a matter of time. And more importantly, I hope that game does go on, and good luck for the second round of the FA Cup. That'll be a very tasty game with Watford there, I can imagine.
Yeah, it will be. We always, to be fair, we've had quite good games against Watford last season before last. So yeah, it's certainly a game we're looking forward to. And it was actually meant to be 3rd of January, so just straight after Christmas. So yeah. Unfortunately, obviously got delayed. But fingers crossed, that can get going. Yeah.
And your plans, Charlie, moving forward? Obviously, you're busy. You've done a lot. You've got this role and the role at the college too. But what's looking like for you, maybe in the next 5-10 years or whatever? Any kind of goals, dreams, ambitions, or are you just going with the flow?
Yeah, obviously a little bit going with the flow as such. I've finished my B licence. I've sent my application for my A licence last month, so awaiting that. Hopefully, fingers crossed. If not, as I say, this year within next year. And yeah, obviously want to get on that. I've been invited, which has been fantastic, by the FA. It's like a high performance coaching group, which is coaches who ultimately you might not be working at Super League, Championship level, who have a passion or want to grow. And ultimately, I just want to probably get as far as I can within that women's game, and whether that's, say, at MK, because we're doing each year we are developing, and I have got a real passion being from MK and seeing everything that, not just that we do on the pitch, but the support, and say, being playing out of our stadium, men's stadium of 30,000, is just one of the fantastic areas of support that the club offer us. And I think, I just think at the moment I'm loving what I do with MK, and I went through, this is a bit off topic, but I went through a lot of my coaching journey where I did try and do every hour of coaching under the sun, and I ended up getting a bit of burnout probably 2.5 years ago, because I was coaching every evening a week, RTC Saturday, so women's Sunday. So actually, I've just really enjoyed having that one focus of, it's the women's team. I've got, as I say, the sessions, trainer sessions, game day, and that, but it's one focus, and not trying to give 25% to 4 different things. And so that's probably what the next few years look like for me.
Well, it sounds like exciting times. You've got a great setup there. You're obviously adding your value as well to what is a wonderful setup at MK Dons. Credit to the club for doing the right thing across the board, and well done to you to embracing it and being part of that journey. I'm looking forward to seeing how it unfolds over the coming years. And it'd be great to have you back on at some point, if you don't mind, Charlie, to share how things are going and update us on how you've developed as a coach and the new things you might be doing at some point in the next 12 or 18 months, if you're up for that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And when we get back to normal, I'll have to drop you a message to come and have a watch when we're out at the stadium.
And you can say, brilliant.
And if we lose, you can go, I didn't see any of them values out there. So, no.
We'll see the real Charlie. Yeah. Brilliant. And just final then, if people want to reach out to you, is there any way in which they could maybe follow what you're up to, or reach out to you and say hi if they wanted to?
Yeah, so I've got a CBillCoach coaching Twitter, which I use quite heavily. If you're more than welcome to pop this on obviously the podcast link. It's probably easier to them to follow. And like I said, I'm always open to and let's say I can send you my email address as well if people want to get in contact, because I am almost open to sharing this, and it's not something that I want to say. I believe in coaching that we should share good practice as much as possible. And I think if people just want to reach out and go, oh, this is what I've done, or can I take this, or can you speak to my squad or whatever, more than happy. So yeah, please feel free to share.
Well, Charlie, you were kind enough to respond back to me through Twitter really quickly and get this set up. I'm really grateful. I think it is a key topic that really, it definitely improved this whole embracing culture and recognising the importance it has in relation to player development. And there's those we can do with it. And by getting people like you on the podcast to share what you're doing and how you're doing it is great, because for our listeners, I know we don't always get access to people like you, and it's just one way of getting that message out there. You're kind enough to give us your time and share your insights to this. And what I can promise you is, like I say to a lot of guests that come on the podcast, there will be coaches I know, including myself, but hundreds of others that listen to this, that will embrace some of these elements you put into place, and therefore will give their players a better journey because of it. So really grateful, and I know it'll make a difference, and I'm sure you'll hear directly from them through the Twitter link. I'll put your Twitter handle in our show notes so people have got that. And look, I'm well up for coming to see a training session at some point in the future, and be great to be back on if you're up for it at some point when we can get an update on how things are going.
100%. No, again, thank you for the opportunity, Scott. Really appreciate it, and thank you, for the work you do with the podcast and allow obviously so many coaches to listen.
That's really kind of me to say. Thanks, Charlie. Well, best of luck, mate. I appreciate your time. I look forward to catching up again soon.
Yes, thank you.